This is Driving Solutions, exclusively on CPTnews.com.
Electric vehicles are undeniably reshaping the way we think about mobility. On today's show, we're talking about the current state of EVs. Joining us now is Jessica Stafford, who is the Senior Vice President of Consumer Solutions at Cox Automotive. There is a company that you know and love. So Jessica, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, great. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So how do consumers feel about EVs? I think this is the $64 million question, as they say, right? I mean, the popularity is there because of the, kind of the new kid on the block, but what's, making buyers, get on the bandwagon?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, consumers are excited about EVs. They're super interested in learning more. And it's interesting because EV sales are still only about 10% or so of the total sales market, but it's growing. The bandwagon is growing. But we've got a few nuances along the way. So, we have a Cox Automotive Path to EV Adoption survey. And so, we love to tap into the data whenever we can. And it's interesting because we're seeing 51% of consumers are considering a battery electric vehicle, which is actually up from 38% previously. So that consideration, that interest is growing. Yeah. And consumers love environmental benefits. They love the potential cost savings, with fuel savings being one of the top factors that they're interested in and why they're jumping on that bandwagon. And with more and more traditional manufacturers that are getting into the EV game, there's more options out there for consumers. So I think the latest data that we saw says that there's going to be about 150 new models that hit the market in the next few years.
Wow.
So production will grow as well. So by 2026, we see EV volumes will be almost 5 times that of what they are today. So there's definitely going to be more options, more choice out there. But we do see, I guess, some of those nuances I was mentioning. There's a difference in interest across geography. So over 50% of EV sales are happening in the west of the U.S. And demand is definitely concentrated into large metro areas, which you would assume, right?
Sure.
This makes sense. This is where there's more charging stations.
Right.
Really an ability to kind of lean into that EV lifestyle. So we see that consumers are super interested. They're shopping a lot. But we do see dealers a little bit more hesitant still. They're not feeling as prepared to sell and service the vehicles. So I think we've got a long way to go as an industry, but definitely more and more interest.
Sure. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this kind of a shift in the marketplace, we kind of anticipated that it's going to take some time to do this, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not like hitting a switch and bingo, everybody's buying and selling EVs, right?
No. I mean, it's going to take time and education on not only, consumers out there that are shopping, but like I said, the dealer side, our industry. I mean, like you said, it's a big change. So over time, we'll see that growth.
Sure. Hey, Tesla regularly captures headlines, but is it still the EV market leader? Are there any other OEMs that could, bump it from the top spot?
Yeah. I mean, Tesla is still by far the top EV brand, but we see others kind of creeping in. There's more real competition out there. So, we look at this based on our Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book shopping numbers. So that gives us a good kind of inclination to what's happening, as well as real sales numbers. And so Tesla's share of new sales has been declining from a share standpoint as more of those traditional manufacturers are entering the market, like I mentioned. And they've got competitive products that they're offering. So over the long term, we think that trend will continue, with Tesla having probably 10 to 20% share of EV sales in the next 5 to 10 years. So they're the leader today from a volume standpoint, but their share is declining a bit. So some information on some of the other manufacturers that are kind of out there challenging Tesla. We've got Hyundai out there that's up for the challenge. So being a top mainstream EV brand, we're seeing that in the shopping behavior on Kelley Blue Book. We see Kelley Blue Book's EV shopper data, so we can see where they're researching and where they're looking at reviews and more information, as well as actual sales volume. And so Hyundai's representing about 9% of EV shoppers right now. Then Kia's EV sub-brand has done really well among consumers. And then you've got Chevy and Ford coming in kind of next in terms of volume of EV shoppers. So you're starting to see some of that competition out there. Now, where we really look at comparing to Tesla is on the luxury end, of course. So Rivian is the top non-Tesla luxury brand when we look at our data.
Interesting.
And yeah, and and they're continuing to grow and
Yeah.
pop.
Yeah.
And behind Rivian, you'll see Mercedes and BMW come in next as far as luxury offerings. Both have launched a mix of SUVs as well as sedans, which plays well for, again, just more options out there for consumers.
Sure.
And so they're out there with their, BMW has their I sub-brand and Mercedes has their EQ line. So they're getting there, but they're not doing nearly as well as Tesla and Rivian out there. And so, we continue to see more and more awareness of these new brands as they advertise and market more.
Sure.
And I'm sure we'll see that shopping behavior grow over time.
It would be interesting to see where the Tesla customer jumps from, what brand. What are the top brands that they jump from? Because obviously they've not been driving Teslas their whole life. They were driving some other luxury, Mercedes-Benz, Lexus, BMW, whatever the case might be, to see, what brands are losing those consumers over to a company like Tesla, right?
That's right. And you're spot on. What we typically see when we dig into kind of the consumer journey and pathing data that we can see across Cox Auto, because we see what consumers might have owned before from our back end data and where they're cross shopping. It's coming from the main luxury manufacturers that they kind of crossed over into the Tesla world. And I think even more interesting, let's see where they go next now that those luxury brands have EV options.
That's the big question, right? Are those brands going to be able to count on that loyalty to say, hey, now we have a product that is equal to or better than Tesla. Come on back, right?
Will they come back? Exactly.
Right. So let me ask you this. This is so we see these beautiful EV trucks. We hear so much about them, the Lightning, and now you've got the Hummer out there, which I guess is more of an SUV, but there's a lot of SUV trucks. What about SUV trucks? Are they of interest to EV buyers?
So they are, but this is where it's interesting, and the data I just mentioned flips. So you had the kind of sedan side and the overall numbers where you see Tesla still leading, and you have the more traditional OEMs at the bottom. Well, that flips when you talk about trucks, because Cox Auto recently surveyed consumers that are looking to buy an EV truck in the next 2 years. So that's where the data comes from. Okay. And we saw that buyers were far more interested in the traditional brands that they know and love: Ford, Ram, Chevy. And when it comes to trucks, we typically do see that truck buyers are quite loyal to their brands. And so maybe that's how this is kind of playing out in the EV space as well. So Rivian actually did pretty well at a 48% number of consideration on the truck space. So still pretty well compared. Had the 3 at the top, and then Tesla had the lowest consideration with 28% considering their Cybertruck. But that's compared to probably around 2/3 of consumers that are interested in the Ford, Ram, Chevy brands. So it's good news for the big 3, and just interesting to see how that segment plays out.
So if you had to pick something here, what's the real reason holding consumers back from purchasing an EV?
From the actual purchase. I mean, what we see is that the very top of the list is that they're still expensive.
So price.
It's price. So just under 50% or so of consumers are saying price. They're expensive, and that's holding me back from making that actual purchase. But right after that price barrier comes the lack of access to charging. And so if you think of it, charging stations, I mean, that's one of the big concerns. I don't really understand charging yet, and battery health of the vehicle in general. How does that work? And so that's a big concern. And then underneath price and the charging piece is continuing down that battery path, because we as consumers just still don't know that much about it, is battery replacement costs. What does that look like over time? And so those are kind of the top 3. The other piece that's interesting that pops a lot in our surveys is that consumers are really confused by the incentives that are out there because they're complex.
Right.
You've got this federal $7,500 tax credit that has a lot of complex criteria to it. It's interesting. Consumers are used to dealers kind of helping them with incentives and making that into the price. And it's a little different in this EV space. And that consumers kind of need to apply for those incentives separately. And so we've got room to grow as an industry there on how we help consumers through that barrier.
All 3 of those reasons make perfect sense. When you rattle them off like that, I put myself in that category, and I have got those same concerns. The cost of it, and the charging capabilities, and how many charging stations are out there, and do I really understand the whole battery, situation? And
Right.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just one of those things that people just are not schooled enough in yet to feel comfortable enough to say, yeah, I'm going to lay down, 60, 70, 80, $100,000 for this EV. And so I totally get that.
I don't know if it'll fit into my lifestyle. I
That's
mean,
right.
it's expected. Like you said, it's new. This is all
Yeah.
still new to us. So
right.
even like you said, for yourself, I likewise the same. And we're, of course, in the industry and very aware of how these things work. But, there's still this concern
Yeah.
of range concern in those charging stations for sure.
That's right. That's right. Is this a forever problem, or can we expect to improve it, do you think?
We'll improve over time. It's not a forever problem. Most problems aren't forever problems, of course, but there's a lot of progress being made right now that I think will serve for momentum going into the future. And so we know that EVs have started to get a little less expensive, and that'll continue over time. That's everything from the technology and the innovation evolving, as well as just the supply and demand that we were just talking about. We've got a lot more models coming out there, a lot more options for consumers. So natural numbers would tell you that the price will come down a bit. I think our data shows that in August, we looked at it and EV prices had dropped nearly 19% compared to the previous year. And
wow.
so
Okay.
significant. I mean, they're coming down. And it's a result of those supply and demand dynamics
Sure.
that'll continue over the next few years. So, that consumer demand is continuing to grow, but outpacing that right now is rapid production. And so we're going to continue to have, a good balance there that I think will solve for the pricing side for sure.
Sure. And what about access to charging? Is that getting better too?
It is. I mean, over time, now this one, I think it's, candidly, it's just going to take a little longer. There's a lot of infrastructure components here, but there's more public charging options out there than ever before, and it's growing. We were also looking at a lot of the OEMs are actually adopting the Tesla charging standard. So they're giving their buyers access to the supercharger network, which will make a big difference. Again, I think a big part of this is consumer education, because we as an industry can help in it from an infrastructure standpoint and access standpoint, but we got to make sure people know about it. And it's interesting. We were also seeing it's going beyond just our automotive realm or industry. So in 2024, we're seeing hotels like Hilton operators are going to install over 20,000 Tesla universal wall connector plugs.
Wow.
At thousands of its hotel locations.
Wow.
And so
they're gearing up.
I mean, that they're investing.
Yeah.
This is significant numbers.
Makes
and
sense.
It makes sense. It's an example that will really help us to drive that adoption and get momentum out there of what's available for consumers, because the more and more that we can get out there, more locations that consumers can charge, the more comfortable that they will get, which is pretty important at this point, because I mentioned one of the biggest things that consumers are looking for in buying an EV is the environmentally friendly part of it, but also the cost savings. And what we're realizing is those cost savings don't really come to fruition unless you have the ability to charge regularly. So whether that's at your office or something that's super convenient to you, but most of all at home. And so kind of innovation on at-home charging opportunities is the next thing that we really have to tackle as well.
Right. So for those EV buyers that see beyond the challenges and aren't deterred by them, what's their draw to EVs?
Yeah. So and by the way, there's a lot of them. As we said, a lot of consumers are really interested in this space. And so we've done a lot of research to understand who is the EV buyer of today and then into tomorrow. And so overarching, we see these buyers are younger. They tend to have a greater interest in technology features, which again seems pretty logical based on what the offerings are in an EV car. But specifically, some of the areas they're most interested in. So you've got over-the-air updates, which is key. So these EV buyers, they want convenience and they want technology. And how those things come together is they want the manufacturer to have the ability to update their vehicle after they've purchased it without me having to go back to the dealership necessarily, anything physical. They believe that through this innovation in the new technology, most of those updates can happen over the air. And so these are just automatic software updates. Like if you update, your iPhone or your software system on your computer regularly, we're all used to that happening in our normal tech-driven lives. And so really looking for that. The other thing that, so behaviorally, we see that they're really interested in those tech updates, like over the air. Driver assistance systems are really important to them. So you got the basics that we are all looking for and used to these days, backup cameras and collision warning and all of these systems that have the bells and whistles of making sure you're driving as safely as possible. But these consumers, they're looking for even more. Everything from safety features to they don't want a physical key or fob of any type. It's kind of like a symbol of which is funny, but of kind of a nice vehicle. They want new tech driven. And then these are digital natives. These are consumers who are super interested in that technology and really everything being digital. And so not only the car itself, but the purchase process. And I know you and I talk about this quite often, but these folks, they want to buy their car online. Over 87% of them are open to buying fully online in the future and today, compared to 73% or so of ICE buyers ambition to buy online in the future. And so there's a lot that's possible because of how some of the Teslas of the world and such have started this process of what a car buying process could look like for EV. So they've made it possible. And now we've got these consumers who are saying, give me all the digital features you can. Yeah.
Is it safe to say that this is also can be broken up by generations to say, Generation Z and millennials are more apt to purchase an EV next go around versus maybe a baby boomer?
They do. I mean, they do, just like anything that's more tech driven right now. Younger generations definitely over index on EV purchases. The one thing that's holding back is the price point, right? And so you do see a little bit of a counterbalance there. And we're seeing more and more across generations of that concept of being a digital native not mattering as much anymore, because so many generations are leaning into, if technology makes my life easier and more seamless, I'm all about it.
That's right. No question about it. Jessica Stafford, Senior Vice President of Consumer Solutions at Cox Automotive. Thank you for your insight today. I know that our viewing audience will get a lot out of your visit with us, so it was a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Driving Solutions, exclusively on CPTnews.com.